Hiya, this is Kitten Features, and you're listening to ShowX Live with Ken in the student accommodation all the way in Scotland. Wait, that was years ago. You're listening to ShowX Live with your favorite Scotsman Ken, currently residing in the US of A, and Wayne, mostly from Colorado.
Hey, wait a second. I'm on the show too, and I don't get any billing at all? Well, I know how to solve this. Soldater, Fremad, March! You're listening to Show X with our favorite Scotsman Ken, our child of the corn Wayne, currently living in Colorado, and Todd, who now has an army of angry Norwegians at his back. Enjoy the show!
Outstanding. All right, everybody. How are you doing today? Welcome to the show. It's 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT on the Sunday, the 11th of October, 2020. And we're just going to leave for you guys this gaping hole over here in the stream where there should be a doctor.
Right above me.
Yep. That because we got a message in for the show saying that he is trying to get here, but has not yet. And so
little professional radio teaser for you at the top of the show, so I can get it in before Ken realizes it, and then he won't know if he doesn't listen to the show back during the week. Coming up next week on Show X, the pros and cons of the gig economy. Is not having availability of a car going to prevent you from making your weekly commitments? Coming up next week on Show X.
Real life conversations about, for everyone who keeps telling me that they don't want people to own their own cars. I'll just say in my current lifestyle, I'm not ready for that.
No, I will say this. I was a little 50-50 on e-cars or electric cars.
Okay.
What I didn't take into account before I started to test drive them was the fact that not having a proper engine per se and having all of the battery power in the bottom of the car lowers the center of gravity to an epic degree.
Oh yeah.
And there are things that you can do in corners with a Hyundai that you should not be able to do in corners with a Hyundai.
Well, did you see the Nürburgring built Model 3 Tesla that just destroyed lap times going around in that? Because while it's a heavy car, and the Teslas are as a whole, like you said, having a sled of batteries at the bottom, and oh, by the way, your motors literally on your wheels, so they're at the points of your wheels, not in front, not behind. It does a lot for one of the magical characteristics of physics you try to accomplish with motorsports, which is, weight distribution and keeping it low to ground, low center of gravity, and keeping the weight where it needs to be corner-wise and stuff like that. So it's all within. And that does a lot for e-vehicles, let alone the ability to torque vector and such, where because everywhere you have an individual motor, it can turn at a different rate and level of power than another motor and another wheel. Mm-hmm. And so the things you can do that help defy physics, like going around corners and having certain wheels turn more or less to help basically redirect the front end of the car, is amazing. Mm-hmm. And so, I have a lot of thoughts. My only concerns right now still live in that where I live and where you live, actually all the hosts on the show, in a couple months here, when the weather done switches, I have not seen nearly enough evidence of how well electric cars and cars with automated driving features and things like that deal with Mother Nature. And
so your lane assist goes out the window.
Yeah, there are no lanes to track.
Because it's scanning for white stuff, and I don't know if you've noticed, but in every place except like city centers and stuff, snow is white.
Very much so.
So,
yeah, no, it's one of those things that when I do, like everywhere I see where they test all those kind of features to make driving less of a thing for your driver to do, it seems to be tested in very much in very pristine environments or areas where the weather doesn't change a whole lot. So yes. But I mean, hey. All right. So today on Show X, as we are waiting hopefully for a pen to arrive, we are going to be talking a little bit about eSports, electronic sports and gaming, and how it compares, if it compares, to regular traditional sports. So that's going to be our main topic today. Before we get into it, we do have some catch-up to do from last week because, as we very specifically said, Ionis had dialed in with an email and we wanted to get to it. In fact, might as well start it here because it may take half the show to get through due to welcome wall of text. So thank you, Ionis, and we'll get to this as we start, as well as for anyone out there, if you want to join in on the conversation, please jump in. If you're on Facebook, it's great if you jump into our Twitch chat, and that way we'll be able to help with that. In fact, I need to look because somehow I don't know who it is in our, I guess it's our Facebook chat that's coming through with a whole bunch of nonsense on here that I'll have to evaluate and go through here. But feel free to jump into twitch.tv and /VtWShowX to jump into the live chat with us. And we will go from there. So let's see. I'm going to, at the same time, jump in and see what's coming up through the, I'm assuming Facebook chat. If it's somewhere else, I'll be surprised. As we get like nonsensical comments coming through. But
lovely.
I'm not sure. Yeah,
that's somebody quoting, I think, YMCA by the looks of things.
Well, some of it, except for part of it, no. But yes. Anyhow.
Well, so I have the resolution set so low for the stream itself. Like I can only see the YMCA,
yes, that part I got
at the end.
So we'll go. Anyhow, let's get to the email. This is coming in response to talking about delays. Is this Blizzard delays next WoW expansion? And Ios is saying in the comments there, is this a sign of Blizzard rebellion against the evil Activision empire? And so let us see. It says, all right, let's see. At the top, he says, in short, no. In long, absolutely not. That is all. And then he continues with the wall. And it says, all right, I guess I should give a bit more context to this. You guys might have already mentioned the sudden delay of Shadowlands announced on the 1st of October, 25 days before the planned release of the new expansion. If not, well, here you go. Despite many negative reactions from people who already booked time off from work for the last week of October, the general consensus seems to sway towards a positive acceptance of the delay. The quote, "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad," by Shigeru Miyamoto is thrown around. There's a lot of talk about the Burning Crusade and its delay. I remember that well. Some see in this bold move a glimpse of what Blizzard might be once more. However, optimists have the rose-tinted glasses put on so hard and so deep, it cuts off the oxygen supply to their brains. And while I'd love nothing more than to have a wonderful expansion ahead of me, this isn't really the case, and Blizzard isn't getting up from their knees to challenge Activision's bean counters yelling, "Monies! Monies now!" Sad truth is, Shadowlands becomes a perfect storm of failure Activision Blizzard cannot afford to release at this point in time. And even Bobby Kotick-level suits understand it now. It doesn't take a game designer or certified agile scrum master to know Shadowlands was crippled by the core system of the game, the Covenants. To make a long story short, that's not according to your email. In Shadowlands, players visit the Azeroth Afterlife controlled by 4 factions. While leveling, heroes will help to unite all 4 groups to fight against the Jailer of the Damned, who is up to no good. Upon finishing the campaign, players will be given a choice to join one of 4 factions, quote, for good. Each faction grants players 2 abilities. Covenant ability. Given to everyone who joins the faction. For example, members of the Necrolords will be granted Fleshcraft ability to use to create absorb shields on themselves. Class ability. An ability based on the player's class, unique to all 12 classes, and, in some cases, working differently depending on the character's specs. Necrolord Priests will unlock an ability Unholy Nova. Necrolord Druids will have the ability to summon swarms of bugs, and Necrolord Death Knights will gain Abomination Limb, and so on. Why does so much of that sound phallic? If there are yellow light blinking in your head right now when you start thinking about the balancing this multitude of abilities, wait, it gets better. Upon joining a covenant, players will start earning renown with their faction, which is used to empower 3 soulbinds. Each of the 3 soulbinds has slots you can put conduits in. Conduits are items that increase the power of different skills your character has. You still with me? Good. The more renown you have, the more powerful your covenant soulbinds become. Now, the system, while complex, is just math. You all know math. So people eventually figure out the, quote, best choice for your class and role. If you're a Restoration Druid, you want to go with Covenant Y. If you're Elemental Shaman, you'll go with Covenant X, and so on. The obviously led to people choosing their best covenants, leaving the ones that aren't mathematically superior behind. And so the impossible act of balancing begun, where Blizzard would nerf the most powerful covenant skills to the point of the beta community shifted to a different covenant that became mathematically superior, which led to another wave of nerfs. What makes the system such a pain in the rear is that the act of changing between covenants takes 2 weeks and forces you to start earning your renown from scratch to empower new soulbinds. Ouch. With different specs or types of content benefiting from different covenants, more players become very sensitive to any change in the system, trying to navigate the jungle of dependencies. At this point, the game has 4 covenants, 12 soulbinds, 12 classes, 36 specs, and 140 plus legendary powers. Oh, right, I forgot. You also get access to legendary powers. Those powers can be put into specific base items, creating legendaries. You can only equip 1 legendary power at any given time, and the powers themselves vary in potency and usefulness depending on your class, role, spec, content, and so on. Oh, and you have to balance all this stuff for rating. Mythic plus dungeons and PvP content. Blizzard is trying, now for over 6 months, to give this system a resemblance of order, and it seems that they are only mildly closer to their goal than they were a half year ago. On top of that, the one and only raid still gets some major revamping to the mechanics, which no one is testing after 6 months of beta anymore. Blizzard also recently changed the amount of XP needed to level up in Shadowlands, turning most enjoyable experience into slugfests, where doing all quests possible is barely enough to get you to your max levels. Shadowlands is also the first expansion in WoW's history to introduce a level squish, with the new max being 60. Interesting. And there's a host of problems related to the old expansions functioning within the new squish level scale. Ooh. On top of that, some talents spells are still not working, and some conduits are still just placeholders. Mind you, the game should be, quote, going gold in about 20 days to meet its original release date. So no, this isn't the rebirth of Blizzard, return to the old standard, quote, it's ready when it's ready. This is an activistic instinct of self-preservation when facing an absolute fustercluck. I hope people will remember when Shadowlands eventually comes out that even TBC premiered in a poor state, with Hellfire Peninsula being a nightmare leveling experience. Warrior Charge made them fall through the world, and Lady Vosh was buggy and unplayable. At this point, following news of Shadowlands becomes my guilty pleasure. It's like watching Titanic trying to steer away from the iceberg. But the iceberg is the size of the Borg cube, and it breathes fire and blasts Rebecca Black's Friday from all its speakers. Because this is how obvious the disaster was 6 months ago for anyone who understands how MMO RPGs like World of Warcraft work. If you want a front row seat to this upcoming train wreck, my guild is recruiting 1 DPS or healer. Whisper me. This whole email was just an elaborate ploy, a ruse. It's all led to my guild ad. Haha, you've been tricked. Haha. Oh God, what am I doing with my life? Kind regards, Ionis. For those who don't know, Holy Priest on Steam Weedle Cartel EU.
Oh my!
Ooh, so thank you for that.
I don't think the level contraction is as hard as Ionis is thinking it is. Simply due to the fact that I think you could just cut everything's level by half, and you'd pretty much be there. Like the early game's not going to be quite where it needs to be, but by the you'd hit.
Hey, who plays
So just
early
thinking
game?
about this, you'd hit Eastern Plaguelands at 30. You'd hit the end of TBC at 35. You'd hit the end of essentially, instead of them being 10 level ups, you'd hit everything in 5 level increments, and you'd finish old Azeroth at like level 30.
Yeah. No, I
like
mean, that makes
slowed
sense.
the leveling process way down.
Well, but then
right?
The question I would have is, with that leveling system, would you suddenly get massive content with each level? Every time you ding, would it be like a ding, wham, ding, bang, boom? Because you have now 2-3 levels worth of content in each ding.
Well, so instead of sitting in the Barrens for what, you get there at level 12 and you stay there until the early 20s. Yeah, you'd start there at level 6 and leave there at level 10.
Yeah.
Right. So you'd be finished with the Badlands at level 10. You'd be finished with Silver Silverleaf Forest. I don't remember what any of these places are called.
These are words.
Like I said, you essentially, what it would do is it would open up a new area every 3 to 5 levels versus every 5 to 10. So it's gonna take you. I mean, that if literally all they did is took everything as it is now and chopped it in half.
Yeah.
Silver Pine Forest. Thank you, Ando. Essentially all it would do is slow the leveling process down by half, right? So it'd take you twice as long to get every level.
Yeah, theoretically, if they did a simple hack at it. Well, so St. Uther says in the chat that at level 10, and I don't know if it's true or not, but at level 10, he says you choose an expansion and it will carry you from 10 to 50, and then Shadowlands from 50 to 60. And now he responded and says, yeah, because I said seriously. He said, yeah, so you get to experience a whole expansion as a leveling experience. So if you love Mists or Wrath, best you can level in that whole experience or expansion. That's interesting.
So I do the starter level and I go to TBC because TBC was the best leveling experience in WoW throughout its entire lifetime. Now, maybe not when it first launched, but
yeah.
TBC was great, and I get 40 levels doing TBC content that I don't have to think much about because I've done it 5 times. And then I go to Shadowlands at level 50 and do 50 to 60 there. Oh, okay.
I mean, I guess that'll work.
Sold, I guess.
Well, and I suppose that's saying my opinion would be that from a Blizzard perspective, that's saying we don't care about the all of our various expansions at this point. They're out there. If you enjoyed one, pick one. We're only going to worry about now really Shadowlands.
I mean, I honestly mentioned balance, but there are some. I mean, the power creep's a real thing. So I don't know how they're going to power creep balance the ease of acquisition of Wrath gear versus some of the craftables and what you had to go through. Right to. Oh yeah, and a copy just came up with another thing. Like, I don't necessarily want to pick one expansion. Like, I don't care if I'm grossly over leveled, but I'd like to hit the greatest hits of all of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, no expansion is perfect, right? So let's say I wanted to do the Barrens because it's really efficient leveling for the early part, because you just go to the crossroads, get 4 quests, complete them, come back, turn them all in, get 4 more quests, go out, do them, come back, turn them all in, lather, rinse, repeat for like 5 hours.
Okay.
And then you're like, okay, I'm done. this is going to suck after that. Now I want to go into TBC. Now I want to start with Hellfire.
Yeah, Hellfire Peninsula
right?
and stuff like that, yeah.
And Hellfire Peninsula, and start going through that stuff and fight demons for the next 15 hours. Yeah. So I can understand that. I mean, what would I do, right? I would take one character through the old world because the old world was fun. I'd take one character through TBC because TBC was even more fun. I might do Wrath once just to remind myself that it's a big instrument. Yeah. And like I'm going to, I'm not playing the game. Also, I mean, this is the same company that came up with the Real Money Auction House, right? So they're not, nor have they ever been infallible. Question. Like, don't get me wrong. Once they got rid of the Real Money Auction House and they came out with the expansion, I don't even remember what the Diablo 3 expansion is called anymore.
Oh gosh,
I would play Diablo 3 any other way. And oh, by the way, there's something to be said. By the way, Blizzard, there's something to be said that your action RPGs are better on the console than they are on the PC. Like, there's something to be said about that too. So anyway.
No, I agree.
I don't know. I like, good on you if you're still playing it after 12 years or 14 years. Like, I admire your stick-to-itiveness. I guess now that I was thinking about this concept of pretty much every media franchise is going to get ruined thanks to the culture war. And as I was thinking about it, I had this little rant going on in my head. It's like, I can still watch 10-year-old Star Wars, and I can still watch 30-year-old or 40-year-old Star Trek, and I can still listen to 15-year-old Star Wars audiobooks, and I can still watch that's 1 and 2 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, right? I can do all of that. I can play 15-year-old video games, or 10-year-old video games, or 20-year-old video games. Like Unreal Tournament 20 now.
Ooh.
Next year, Unreal Tournament's going to be old enough to drink in America. Like, I guess I'll play all that stuff. Like, if we're going to insist that the creative process gets compromised in the name of diversity for diversity's sake, like, I don't have to spend any of that money, right?
You don't have to jump in on that at all.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
But no, hey, I know there's a lot of people out there still playing it. Good them. It's not something that I've been watching or following, but so I appreciate, like, Ionis, you chiming in with it. In fact, it's funny, I was playing a little bit of Among Us yesterday with my niece. It invited me into a match, and she was playing with a bunch of her WoW players. And so it was interesting for me to kind of go, or just to hear their chats and stuff, thinking, what, I have nothing in common with what they're discussing anymore when it comes to the various types of, everything WoW related, essentially everything they're saying. I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't know. Sure. Okay. You do this. So it was interesting for me to kind of just hear it a little bit. I'm like, okay. And yeah, but that all aside, today we're going to thank you again for the email, Ionis. It was a wall, but it was energetic and well written, and I appreciate that. So definitely salute to you for that. Let us jump in on the main topic today. So again, not knowing when or if Ken is going to show up today, we'll see. So hopefully he'll pop in and be all exasperated because he finally made it from across the massive town he lives in Michigan. Yeah, little college town.
It is a college town, and school is in session, so who knows?
But apparently buses don't run on Sundays. And maybe, oh, you know what's probably happened? Oh, wait, no, today's a Sunday. Now, I was going to say, if it's a Saturday, I was going to say maybe there was sports ball happening in the sense of like the college games or something.
The Big Ten's not playing sports
ball. Oh, wait,
ball.
look.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, VtWShowX, live on Twitch TV, is proud to present to you Dr. Professor, Rear Admiral, Jedi Master, 3 times heavyweight champion of the world, 10 gig economy Reed.
Dun, dun,
that was
dun.
That was a good one. I enjoyed that one thoroughly.
Hey, we were able to stall just long enough for Ken to be able to jump into us and join the show before we get into the main topic today. So
26 minutes of stalling.
No, we had 26 minutes of an email from Ionis is what that was.
Ionis is what Stormtamer was 10 years ago.
Yes,
yeah, right.
He gave us our Yeah, it was well written though. I gotta say he got some like zingers in that I quite appreciated. So, all right, I'm gonna make you fill out the frame here. We'll see if it jumps and makes you bigger
I
or
work
not.
on filling it myself. I don't need any help.
So, to start today's discussion.
Gig economy, Ken.
Tell us all about the economy.
No,
the gig economy. I heard you were struggling finding members of the gig economy to help you out or hook you up.
Yeah. So I apologize for being late, everyone. I'm sure Wade mentioned or Todd mentioned what was going on, but basically, I did my shop like an hour and a half ago, and for whatever reason, I guess it's Sunday after church, nobody wants to work or something. I don't know. But there was nobody available on Uber or Lyft, so I was just sitting there with bags and bags of shopping. I did actually try carrying it with the thought, maybe I could carry it back. Problem was I had like 6 liters of milk, I had like 4 liters of soda, and then all the like food shopping on top, and cleaning supplies like white vinegar.
You're one of those.
Oh.
And I would just like to say from the bottom of my heart, as a person who used to deliver groceries to people, right? And some more context for all of you non-Norwegians out there. There's a Norwegian regulation that says if your building is more than 5 stories tall, you have to have an elevator. So guess how tall most buildings in not central Oslo, but like the ring around central Oslo. Guess how tall all those.
I'm going to say a nice even number around say 4.
Yep. And having had to from time to time carry those 6 liters of milk up 4 flights of stairs, I would just like to say thank you. Truly. Well and truly thank you.
I do like it. I drink milk like water. I really do. But
I hear you, dude. I mean, the one thing I'm giving you a hard time about that particular bit. Hauling all of that milk upstairs for a year and a half full time, I lost 20 kilos. Like it's nothing.
Oh yeah, it's good for that for sure.
I was in phenomenal shape at the end of that, and then of course I got a desk job again, and that totally I was just looking to see if maybe the Detroit Lions were playing today, but it looks like they are not.
See, that was going to be my thought initially too, was maybe, football is happening and therefore everyone is otherwise occupied.
Yes, but it doesn't look like the Detroit Lions are playing today.
Detroit Lions, I thought that was more like deep south is where the sort of mountain lions were, but I don't understand sports.
This is a good segue as we start. It's a good segue as we start to bring things in, because today we're going to talk about sports, or at least a comparison and a discussion between what is commonly referred to as eSports, discussing things about gaming and what that has become from a competitive perspective, and traditional sports that are kind of the framework of what many people across the world are used to spending their time focusing on, cheering on teams, and enjoying the pastimes that we see. So, to help frame the discussion, I guess it's probably worthwhile to discuss a little bit of what, how we describe what is an esport. which I kind of like started there with a little bit. I am going to be referencing this article I found from Roundhill Investments that I thought is kind of interesting, as the VTW bot throws it in there for anyone who wants to follow along. I'll reference this a couple times, both because it was written just in the last month or so, and it talks in general from an investment perspective about esports and the research therefore.
I like it, eSports.
Esports. That's much more accurate than sports.
So it has the quick synopsis I'll do is a middle section of what it talks about. It says, what is esports? And they describe it very quickly, and then they'll talk about history and traditional. I'll finish with that, and then we'll get into the conversation. So they start out, Roundhill Investments in this article says, while the exact definition for esports will vary depending on who you ask, most would agree with the following. Esports is playing video games competitively. As alluded to above in the article, it says, this includes countless different titles, number of genres, multiple types of gaming devices, and varied structures to competitive play. And then it has a brief history saying, and this is kind of, I was surprised by where they went to this. Esports by definition had to start after video games were invented. The first, quote, esports event was likely held in 1972 at Stanford University, where players competed in a decade-old game called Space War. Later, esports crowned its first celebrity in Billy Mitchell, who at one point held records in arcade games Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. Years later, his activities were retroactively became esports' first major scandal. For anyone who hasn't watched, King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters, which I highly recommend. Advances in technology accelerated the growth of esports from the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, in the mid-80s to proliferation of PC gaming, which, with a little help from the internet, allowed gamers to compete without being in the same location. The rise in PC gaming saw the advent of the first esports leagues, as well as esports events that look a lot more like today's events than they did in Stanford at 1972. One event for a popular game called Quake caught the public's attention when eventual victor Dennis Thresh Fong took home a Ferrari 328 GTS as his prize for winning. Technological advances continue to move the industry forward, culminating in the introduction of video streaming technology, not to be confused with game streaming, which has had a tremendous impact on esports and gaming more broadly, leading us to today's manifestation of the competitive gaming industry. Now, in comparison to that, it says the history of traditional sports is a little shorter, hopefully a lot already assumed by everyone. Traditional sports have a much longer history, hence the claim of them being, quote, traditional ones. Nearly every ancient culture enjoyed some form of, quote, sport. Perhaps best known is the sporting history of ancient Greece, which gave birth to the biannual sporting festival commonly known as the Olympic Games. You know the ones. The games themselves have evolved over time, with some pastimes showing stronger staying power than others. For example, wrestling has existed in some form or another for 5,000 years, while others developed comparatively later, like soccer, which was 2,000 years ago, and basketball 130 years ago. Many of the recent technological advances have helped enable the rapid growth in esports, have also affected traditional sports as well. Think of things like goal cams and other ways of covering the sport. All right. So that is the primary description they provide on this site of esports and sports. And so the conversation coming out from this as we start is essentially just saying, what are esports, the overall theme, comparable to sports, essentially? And that is the discussion we had. So, from a base point, Ken, how would you think, or what do you think about esports in general?
Okay, that's a big question. In general, a summary. So esports are something that I remember first seeing the first inklings of this before it was called esports. Was probably Warcraft 3, right? I remember seeing the leaderboards up there across Battle.net, the original Battle.net. Kind of like you see in arcade box, right? You go to the arcade, see the leaderboards there. Those were the original esports, right? Those were the original competitive video game sports, I should say. And then obviously the advent of online and the internet made it easier to compete with anybody around the world. After that, I think the first real inkling of esports from what I saw personally was probably World of Warcraft Arena. Because of course you had Doom and everything, people playing that, and you had Populous. The beginning was one that I played when I was young. People playing online together, but it wasn't about leadership or winning anything. There's no competitions. It was just hanging out and playing. But the first actual esports I would say is probably World of Warcraft Arena because you'd see these people getting sponsored suddenly. And I remember the first time I heard of that, and I thought that's a little bit crazy, isn't it? Getting sponsored to play a video game. That's a bit mad. That's not going to catch on, is it? How wrong I was. And then, of course, League of Legends and Dota 2. Not the Warcraft 3 Dota, the actual standalone Dota. Those obviously took off in a big way. So did Smite. And then we are where we are today, where esports brings in crazy money each year. Like, if you actually look at the esports internationally, it brings in more money than the vast majority of American sports. Visa laws have been modified to allow people who are esports participants to come into the country on a visa specifically to do esports. I mean, it's big enough to bring in insane money to change the law. It's pretty big. I don't think it's a small thing. I don't think it's something we shoved under a rug. And I think the most interesting thing for me personally about esports is most people haven't heard of it. You know, if you go and talk to somebody who's not like a geek or a gamer, we'll talk to your parents, your grandparents, an average person on the street who doesn't play video games, which there's a lot of people who don't, right? If you talk to them and about esports, they'll say, "What's that? Is that just like trying to stream ESPN? Like, what does that mean?" Right? They don't understand it. They have no idea. They have no concept of it. And it's because for some reason, this idea of competitive video game is being kept in it's like a well-known secret. It's like its own little echo chamber that doesn't escape out. And while there are now, TV channels dedicated to esports and stuff, you don't really see it on the mainstream news. You don't really see it as the esports segment on the BBC or CNN or Fox, right? It doesn't exist. Instead, it's hidden away within the esports channel, and that's the real oddity here is that it hasn't been so integrated into everything like sports has. So there's my sort of overview and splurge of general thoughts on esports at the moment. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Todd, to you, general thoughts on just esports itself and like how you see, it's come up in a time frame of us being here where it was not existent at all, essentially, to where now there is a very persistent following and growth in the industry around competitive gaming. So. Sure. So what are some of your thoughts on what you've seen in generalization of esports as a whole? And then we'll start breaking down into some of the specifics.
I'm going to mix about 6 metaphors.
Okay.
I think.
Ready. I will try to track.
It's hard. You have to, it's as if so imagine if the appeal to popularity fallacy had an embodiment. And that embodiment was of a foodstuff that humans would eat. Okay. And then a bunch of marketing people started making it smoke crack cocaine until its heart exploded.
Okay.
And so you have this corpse. You have this corpse of the embodiment of the appeal to popularity fallacy, and then a bunch of other marketing people started circulating this corpse like vultures. And would swoop down to try and pick the corpse clean, and then as soon as there isn't anything more to be harvested from it, I'd just disappear.
Okay.
That's what esports is, and at worst, at best, it's professional wrestling or roller derby, like 1970s roller derby.
Interesting.
At best.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this whole thing is it's a farce. It is a farce. And simply because it makes a lot of money and a lot of people like it doesn't make it any less farcical. Like, none of the infrastructure that real sports has is present in esports. None. Not one shred of it. Right?
Over the stadiums.
Well, wait, no. I'm curious. When you say infrastructure, what are you describing about?
I don't even know what I don't even know how big these venues are. I think once I saw, so they may have packed 20,000 people into a place like a basketball arena. Again, it's popular and you can dupe people into showing up to your spectacle. P.T. Barnum, right? There's a sucker born every minute. But again, we're talking about sports. Like, sports has all kinds of things that esports just doesn't have. And once esports has those things, I will be very happy. And I'll be one of the first people in line to go, you know what, esports? I have dogged you from day one that I ever heard the term. And now you finally, after years and years and years, finally put together a package that even somebody as cynical and bitter as me can't deny the fact that you are just as much a sport as the NFL or the NBA or the MLB or the PGA.
So you said that there are some.
Line.
Well, wait. So you said there are several things that traditional sports have that esports don't. Could you list several of those things?
Sure. So, context for everybody in the chat who may not know, I am a sports nerd. So, this is a hot button emotional topic for me. So, there are a couple of different models for organizing your sport, right? There's the golf motorsport, bowling type of a model where you have a tour, lots of people show up, or you have people participate in a tournament style format. They acquire points and or winnings based on their performance week to week, and at the end of the season, you total up all the points, and the person or team with the most points is the champion.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Model number 2, I would call the European model, which should be European football rugby model, where you would have a small number of teams in the top league, 12 or 14 or something like that, and then a bunch of teams in a secondary league. And wins earn you points, or wins earn you standing. And at the end of the season, like the top 2 or top 4 play in a 2-week playoff to determine who the champion is, and the bottom 2 or 4 teams end up dropping down to the subordinate league, and the top teams from the subordinate league pop up into the main league, right? Yeah. So we're talking about regional teams, that kind of thing.
Playoffs and such, essentially.
Model, what's that?
Like playoffs in a way, or different than that?
Yeah. I mean, so again, let's say 12 teams. Top 4 teams have a playoff. Bottom 2 teams get tossed out of the Premier League or the primary league down to a subordinate league.
Yep.
And the top 2 teams from the subordinate league get promoted up to the Premier League, right? Or the primary league. Okay. And then the third model is the American Big Four model. Baseball, basketball, football, American football, and hockey, where you have a set of regional teams in divisions that are, segregated either east and west, north or south, or, both. Some number of those teams get together every year, have a playoff. The winner of the playoff is the champion. You have a draft. There are player contracts, all of that kind of stuff, right? Okay. So you could fit esports into any one of those 3 models, depending on what game you're playing, and so on and so forth, right?
Agreed.
Like Blizzard's gone probably the farthest in regards to building the infrastructure, because they actually own the league, right? They own OWL.
Okay.
So that's a big part of it. Alternatively, you could have a league ownership group buy a game license, right? Or have a license deal for the game itself. So imagine if somebody wanted to have a Counter-Strike Source league, they could come up with some sort of licensing deal for Counter-Strike Source with Valve. or whoever owns Counter-Strike Source. I don't even know who that is.
Okay.
Right? And then the same kind of thing, right? Regional teams competing, you compete inside the you compete with the teams inside your own little region. So think of American football, right? Minneapolis, Green Bay, Detroit, and Chicago, right? They play each other twice, and then you play 8 other teams from the same conference, one division from the same conference, one division from the opposite conference, and then you have two sort of open games that you can fill with anybody, right? Okay. And so you play a schedule, right? In the case of American football, starts in right around Labor Day or the beginning of September, finishes up at the end of December, and then you have the playoffs. Playoffs take 4 weeks. And the first week of February, you have the championship game, and you're done. And then the off season happens, right? Which is where the draft and the free agency period and rule changes and all of this stuff.
Yeah, anything that modifies or changes for the get ready for the next season.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Now I'll go even one further, but we have to come back to it because I really want to complain about it.
Okay.
Then you'd have a media model just like sports, right? There would be beat reporters. Like, just use Kotaku as an example. Kotaku would have a Green Bay eSports team beat reporter, right? That would go to the Green Bay eSports house, right? Which would be the equivalent of the locker room because all this stuff is happening virtually.
Yeah.
So that member of the media would have access to the Green Bay eSports team's gamer house to conduct interviews and talk to the coaches and talk to the management and talk to the players, and you'd have all of that sort of reporting that you have
the coverage all the coverage you have of the players and people involved.
Esports doesn't have any of that.
You say that, but what do you mean they don't have any of that? I feel like esports has all of that.
So
actually.
OWL had regional teams, right? That was Blizzard's big Blizzard's big thing. They owned the league, and the league had regional teams associated with it.
And Activision's trying
some
to
of them were
branch
in
that further.
China.
Yeah, because Activision specifically trying to branch that further. League of Legends has that regionally because they have EU. They have EU. They have the Asian market, the Pacific.
League of Legends has.
They have Pacific. They have North American, South American. The Pacific and EU are all their regionals. Basically, on the servers they host, they have those as the regional teams on how they branch out their servers.
So EU League of Legends has a Paris team.
They have a EU-based setup of teams.
Yeah, that's not good enough. Just saying that we've segregated our server based on Europe and North America and South America and Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia or whatever the divisions are. Like, that's not good enough, right?
Well, you say not good enough. What is required in your definition of regionalizing sports for it to become credible as an actual thing that you can get behind one group to another or such? Because
it's a much more local phenomenon. If we want to do Europe, it would be London and Paris and Amsterdam and Berlin and Oslo and Stockholm and Madrid and Rome. The Rome Romans should be pretty funny. And again, so you would have home and away games. Like Rome would travel to London. London would travel to Stockholm, or not in the same week. Rome would travel to London. Oslo would travel to Stockholm. Madrid would travel to Berlin. Paris would travel to Krakow, for example. Right? And you'd have a schedule where there'd be home and away games. And then, right, you would have the event at a stadium like they do now. And you'd have fans of that team, right? Local fans that could show up show up and fill the stadium, and it would have a home field atmosphere, and so on and so on and so on.
Well, so is your argument more, or your discussion about a comp of what a sports traditionally has versus a non-traditional sport, an esport, down to more the physical interaction that you would have with a team and stuff like that? Because I ask because even though I live in, the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, any teams I actually support exist completely in different regions. Like, I don't give a crap because, and I argue that, like, my team I grew up with, the Chargers, when it came to a sports ball team, don't exist anymore. They're gone. I don't follow football anymore because my team dissipated. They moved on and reneged against the city I cared about. But I'm asking because I'm like, right now I have on my screen the LOL eSports setup. Like, they are currently going through Worlds, their big international tournament. And in Worlds, they have various brackets set up for the different groups that are playing. And those groups are set up based off, you have International Worlds, they have different leagues, the North American, Europe, Korea, China, Turkey, Brazil, for all regional events that get down to Oceanic was the one I was trying to think of before. Japan has one, and they have all these other tournaments that they've set up regionally that I know a ton of people follow, like the specific teams. And yes, those teams may exist to some level virtually, but in most cases, from what I've seen, at least in the league perspective one, they tend to coexist and often come together in like team houses, their own training grounds, their own training thing like that they get access from. In league, they do a lot of like profiles. Riot Games has done a lot of profiles of the various teams where they'll go and see them training. They'll go to their houses. They'll do video exposés of the various players and things like that. And I'm curious because I've seen other aspects that seem to me to like blur the lines or carry over. Things like their merch that they have, the team owners, the managers, all of these things that seem to me to be very much what I see in any other sport. And especially when you think of smaller sports than football. Because football's its own beast, but like the hockey.
We've just seen, it's like we're on the Titanic and we've just seen the top tip of the iceberg, right? Because I can keep going. Like, who is the last draft pick of your favorite EU League of Legends team?
Admittedly, I don't follow.
The point is they don't have a draft. Right?
They don't have a draft. Everyone, from what I've seen, would be most comparable to free agent. And I say that because I actually grabbed an article. Actually, it might be in my notes. I grabbed an article that was specifically Cloud9, and I don't know which sport this is for, but from Reuters, right, news. It said Cloud9 re-signs Floppy to a $432,000 deal. They said they confirmed that they signed Ricky Floppy Kamari, will be part of the new Counter-Strike Global Offensive team, signing the 20-year-old American to a 3-year, $432,000 contract. And Cloud9's European-based Colossus lineup also includes, so this is part of the EU team, several members. They have their, let's see.
And I'm sorry, did you say it was 3 years, $430,000?
It said 430 grand. Yep, 3 years. 3 years, 430 grand.
All right.
For a single member of the Global Offensive CSGO team for the EU. So you're right. I don't see drafts, but I've definitely seen like free agent kinds of interactions with members and teams being flopped and switched and things like that.
If I was uber rich and unsavory, I could upset the competitive balance of whatever esport I wanted to participate in.
Okay.
Right?
And are you saying that
it's not about the health of the sport, it's about winning lots of games.
Well, but are you saying that is in any way different than what traditional sports does?
Sure, pretty much every sport has a salary cap.
Like New York teams care in what way?
Baseball. So baseball is the counter example. Baseball doesn't have a hard salary cap.
Well, I'm just saying, in the same, there are sports. there are sports that have salary caps and try to make some kind of level playing field across sports for anyone to improve and do stuff. But there's also sports that don't give a flying F because they just want to win and are willing to break every rule and pay every fine and do whatever they can, dirty or not, to win. And so I would argue that traditional sports are not immune to people, and even the Olympics, right?
Dispute that.
Because in the Olympics, you have players going from NBA teams back to home countries to participate as part of their nation, to thus make their team capable, although they spend all of their time, money, and effort in U.S. leagues playing the game.
Sure.
And so I feel like that's almost the exact same issue.
That the United States would win every gold medal in basketball ever, right?
America. But I'm saying that in the same way, I don't think that there's any real, I don't think there's a hard differentiation between traditional sports and esports when it comes to how talent gets scouted, moved, hired, and things like that.
I think it's enormous. I think it's enormous and it's fundamental, right? So how do we, let's say the 2020 after Worlds, right? When the 2020 League of Legends Pro season ends, how do we distribute players to the teams going into the 2021 League of Legends Pro season? Like, it's just the Wild West. So if my team isn't very good, then I fire everybody. And how do I get new talent? Right? So
theoretically, you
you
try to poach, you try to hire people. I'm curious because the same thing happens in motorsports. When I watch F1, there's a constant jockeying for drivers all the time. And there's never you can't hire the next best driver. It's however much you want to spend. Ferrari spends, like, I think it's almost 10 times the amount of money on their F1 team than the lowest team in F1. And so salaries, there are no caps. The amount of research and development they put in the cars has no cap. They can do whatever the heck they want, basically. And there's nothing that says that Ferrari cannot spend $10 billion a year on their motorsports team. While I forget that some of the low ones, please watch, if you have Netflix, watch the F1 thing they do on there, because that's a great insight into F1 racing. But like the lowest team spending like $50 million a year, and Ferrari's like $450 to $500 million a year on their F1 team. And yet they're competing together, and everyone's like, yeah, that's motorsports. So in a way, I still feel like that's almost the exact same model that you get out of any digital one.
And I would argue that that's a bad model. Right?
Okay.
So,
but
again,
is that then a disqualifying? Is that a disqualifying factor for something being considered a sport?
Well, it is to me. Okay. So hold on a second. If your primary goal is long-term legitimacy of, or long-term integrity of the sport, right? Which is what mine would be, right? It's not like I want to see esports fail. Like, I don't have a dog in that fight. I don't care. It's sad to me that the bad games get esports and the really great ones, in my opinion, like, are not esportable, I guess.
Well, I mean, there's mechanics of
the most fast-paced combat kind of.
Well, I just competitive EU4 is not going to be very telegenic.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like any sports. There are even traditional sports that don't maintain or catch on because the ability for people to enjoy watching it or feeling like they can participate is too low to care. Like, I don't know what competitive Minecraft would be. Just like when you have, like, arguably there are things that are active activities you do that take physical prowess that may end up in world records in a Guinness book, but are not considered sports, right? Like, so competitive hula hooping.
It's also possible. Sure. And it's also possible that the model that we need to use changes from game to game, right? So competitive Isaac was played as a race.
Gotcha.
Right?
Timed-based event.
Yeah. And so they would have tournaments week to week, right? And the winners of all those tournaments got to play in a tournament of champions at the end of the at the end of this season for competitive Isaac, right? And there was nothing on the line, so it was much more of a club activity than an actual sport. But still, like, there's a model there to put together, right? And because Isaac is individual and not a team sport, like, we don't have there's not the thing about allocating talent from year to year and contracts with the players and players unions and all of those kinds of things, right? The people that are there, whose job it is to protect the players from team ownership, right? That doesn't exist as far as I know.
Well,
now maybe that's
so kind of tailing off of what Babs just said, where he doesn't believe that salary caps is what makes a sport a legit sport. One of the questions I would say is, when did traditional sports instill salary caps? Are salary caps not a response to a problem observed in the way different sports are basically adjudicated or happen, versus a necessary tool to legitimize that it is a sport because you need this safety net? Or is it not that in many cases those safety nets came because they saw that things were being abused? Because I admit, I would argue, I don't believe salary caps came with baseball, football, basketball, hockey, that they were a result of teams doing exactly what you're saying. You're making a point.
Look more dignified. I could shake it at the screen. First of all, Babs is wrong. And second of all, this is so much in the tenor of the old show. I love it.
Can I give a shout out to the chat? Actually, they've been really great. Thank you to the chat for providing lots of interesting counterpoints, especially Babs. He's spamming like,
he's going nuts. He's going nuts. Salary caps were a response to a phenomenon that was happening between large television market teams and small television market teams, right? That I don't necessarily think would be a problem with esports, because you would not have to use pre-cable TV distribution methods, right, for your team's games. Right, think about an environment before cable, right? There are just more eyes.
Broadcast television or local participation.
Right. So there was a big problem with a differentiation in revenue between, say, a New York team and a Wisconsin team, right? 8 million people in New York proper versus maybe 1.2 million in Milwaukee metro area, to compare the Brewers and the Yankees. But some of that goes away because all of this stuff can be broadcast virtually, right, or streamed.
Now that we have streaming services for all sports, for video games, for everything out there, you have world audience, eyeballs everywhere. Regions are less, perhaps, impactful.
Again, just to be absolutely clear, to Babs, it's not like, as I said, it's not like I want esports to fail, or not that I think that esports can't become sports at some point. My opinion is that far too many people are far too worried about making lots of money to take the responsibility that it takes in order to set these things up so that they would have long-term integrity and health. And again, this is a very casual observer's view of this. It really looks to me like a bunch of venture capitalists are circling a penny stock and trying to dupe as many people to get in on the penny stock as possible to drive up the price so they can unload, hundreds of millions of shares of that penny stock and bankrupt all the people that they got to buy the penny stock to drive up the price in the first place.
To get their profits and run.
That's what all of esports feels like to me.
Okay, so on that note, we're going to take a break. And we're going to let everybody collect their thoughts during this quick break. And we're going to play a OC remix song from in the realm of the game Mirror's Edge, that call it a sport and activity. I don't know what you would call that free run experience in Mirror's Edge, how it would relate closer to, but it's definitely a physical activity. That will be back in basically about 3.5 minutes. So with that, you are watching ShowX on twitch.tv/YouTube/Facebook, wherever you want. But please jump into the Twitch chat at twitch.tv/VtWShowX if you want to join along in the conversation. We'd love to have you. As well as you can email in to VtWShowX@gmail.com so we can get more of your opinions on what it is about esports versus sports and how things continue to grow and where they fit into our definition of what everything exists as. So we'll be back right after this. You're watching ShowX here on Twitch, and we love having you, everybody. So we'll be back right after this. I say as up. What? I say this as suddenly my break music. My break music says, "No, I'm using something else." No, you're not. I have to fix you again. It's changing on me mid-term. So there will be, yep, it sure enough changed. You piece of junk. There, do the thing like I told you to. And now hopefully play. Be back after this.
You're listening to ShowX on VtWProductions.com.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the show. Thank you for enjoying that. That was actually a pretty uplifting little OC remix there. I like the kind of musical sound to it and how energetic that music break was. So hopefully you guys are equally continuing with this nice energy we have today on the show. Coming back, I want to go to you, Ken, to kind of talk about a little bit of what you've been hearing, stuff like this, about kind of the structure of the different types of activities we enjoy between sports and what are currently dominated or kind of brought together as esports, and some of the discussion you've been hearing about what you're thinking based on what Todd's presented and some of the points we've been seeing in the chat. Ken, how are you feeling about it right now? What do you think about kind of this comparison between sports and esports?
So I think it's quite good, actually, this discussion between the three of us, because while we generally sort of fit a pretty singular, demographic most of the time, I think with this we're actually in quite opposing viewpoints. Because obviously I don't like sports, right? I've never been particularly keen on them. It's not that I have an active dislike for them; I just have never gotten it. And it's like Legend Tinker said in the chat. It said, I'm also someone who just doesn't get people's obsession over sports, especially the US's obsession with football and the rest of the world's obsession with real football or soccer, right? And yeah, having both been outside of the US and now coming in, and I've seen a basketball game, but that's all. I can't say I've seen a fair representation of sports here yet. I don't think that's fair at all for me to see. I've seen one single game of a single type of game. But I've seen people's reactions to it. I've seen people talking about it, usually with fervor and passion. And I love seeing that with people's hobbies. It's great to see people getting so excited over something that, that they're interested in. I think that's a good thing about sports. I think it also appeals to some part of our psychology about this tribalism aspect, right? This us versus them, our team, we win, hurrah, we lose, right? I think that's a big part of it, is that sort of psychology. And, we experience that on a day-to-day level, whether it be competitiveness through our businesses or even playing video games. Like, that competitive aspect between peoples is very important to us, I think. And I think sports just plays upon that. So I have nothing against any of it. I just think that, and when we're talking about esports, I see clear lines of similarity there, right?
Okay.
I think Todd's viewpoint on esports, as again we said in chat, and which actually is helping me form my own opinions here, is that I think your opinions are largely based on the business side of it as well, Todd. You do seem to prefer thinking about, how much money is being paid, the infrastructure and the likes. I'm seeing it more as a consumer. I'm seeing it as I could go sit down and put on the TV football, or I could put on esports. It's just as easy for me to bet on both and gamble on both. It's just as easy for me to talk about online and find a community willing to discuss it. If I looked at a local like Reddit or something, in fact, I think especially in East Lansing, where it's college,
big football town in America.
No, it is very big football town, but I was also going to say it'd be just as easy for me to find like a gaming club as it would a sports club here. I think because the gaming thing here is really big. In fact, there are esports scholarships at my college, right?
So that's that's an interesting point you bring up, Ken, and something I want to talk about some more of the ways that I've observed esports and how it in ways shows similarities to traditional sports. There's a lot of articles I've been looking at, but one was specifically about, and I think it was even from the Roundhill Investments articles, stuff about sponsorships and such, and future, or it might have been a different one I was looking at. But there's it was this Playverse is one of the sites I'd gone to, which is playvs.com. And it's basically setting up a place for high school level competitive gaming to start forming groups and to find other groups to play with and things like that, to get into seasons all the way down from a high school level and carry it up through college. Also noted that I was kind of curious to see, but I started seeing when I just researched or looked up like esports versus sports, how many articles I saw coming up from things that are starting to kind of cross, because ESPN, traditionally one of the biggest networks out there for talking about sports news, right? They have a whole section now for esports on their top banner. Right next to, they have NFL, NBA, MLB, soccer, NCAAF, tennis, and esports right up there, along with their ... of other things you can reach into. But it's up above, esports shows up on their ticker above MMA, CFL, cricket, golf, Olympic sports, WWE, horse racing, rugby, NHL, NASCAR, and maybe this is just because it's current and how many stories and games are coming up right now about it, but they have a whole section on esports that has a ton of articles in it. And what surprised me even more was when I went, because one of the things I thought wrenching kind of thing was, again, kind of to the business side of things versus the just entertainment, but a thing that ties, I think, hand in hand with entertainment is betting, as odd as that may seem, but I think something that Todd, you're aware of, the Vegas Live, things like that, sports bet, and how I have been inundated lately with adverts for new opportunities to bet online against sports and some of the things out there. And I saw that one of the major companies that's doing that, they're not advertising with us, so I'm not going to give them their name. I did not see, might have had a sports or have a celebrity of a Jamie Foxx variety advertising for them out of a large venue in Vegas, but has done online sports booking now. They didn't have anything for esports, but there's this other site I went to, gg.bet, that has a combination of both regular traditional sports betting and esports betting across all these different genres, which is really interesting. And their site's surprisingly cool because everything that has like an esport, they have a watch button that you can watch it right away, where one of the challenges with traditional sports is, like we talked about earlier, licensing, or that came where they can't necessarily show certain sports live, but they can absolutely show like the Twitch stream that has a sport. But I'm just saying some of the things I witnessed. And one more for Todd, and I'll let you jump back in. Okay. When I went to a couple years ago, what was for me my own personal real experience, because I've gone to sporting events throughout my life. Enjoy the heck out of them, and kind of like what you were saying, Ken, about your experience with basketball and seeing in your college town and stuff, the kind of the crowd, the interaction, everybody jumping on, how fun and how like it becomes a group kind of experience. When I went to DreamHack here in Colorado, in DreamHack, one of the big premier multi-country LAN tournament companies out there, and they hosted an event in Colorado here in Denver at the Stock Show location. They had live tournaments going on for the top competitors on a stage set up in one of the Coliseums. And they had it bracketed out in one of the most professional ways I'd ever experienced, where they had different types of games showcased in different quadrants, more than that, like 6 areas within that Coliseum, that you could go and sit in the stands and be looking at your segregated area with the sound being banked to you and your top teams competing there on stage live with big screens over the top watching. And the way that people were reacting in the stands for watching these teams play, both League of Legends, Dota, they had CSGO going, and I want to say they might have had like Overwatch or something else tournaments running. But watching like the fans locally is just like a Colorado crowd going and cheering on these teams and going nuts over it, and all this normal stuff that I experience when I go to a Nuggets game was really enlightening. Or just kind of like, you do get such a similar level of like that crowd interaction and kind of that fervor for what they're into from that, just from my own personal experience that I saw. That was really interesting to me. That for me, I'm seeing more and more things that put esports, from what I've witnessed and what I watch online, and damn it, Riot for making me get bonus XP and rewards for watching your VODs of your tournament that you tie into the game itself. That is so slick and smart. To what got professional sports throughout my life as well. I'm seeing more and more similarities myself that make me feel like they're on a very similar path, if not just a different trajectory based on when they started. All right. Todd, please respond. And Ionis, if you missed it, since I now see you in chat, I did read your whole email at the top of the show. And so if you need to come back to the wall of text, Todd and I spent a half hour talking about your Blizzard email. So if you missed it, that's where it's at.
It's actually Wednesday, Ionis. I missed work meetings and all kinds of things. Like, good Lord, Storm Tamer with the emails. I'm just kidding. Thanks for writing it.
No, we very much appreciate it, even the walls of text.
Yeah. Caution, don't get caught up in the romantic side of the endeavor, right? Because I'm hearing a lot of that. Oh, They have sponsors and they can fill arenas and there's a buzz in the arena, which is just like going to an NBA arena and watching a basketball game. I don't deny any of that. All of that is real, right? I get all of that. Understand it all. Okay? And I think saying that I'm looking at it from a business perspective is a little bit of a misnomer. I'm looking at it from an long-term integrity of the sport perspective.
So why do you think maximum employee salary caps, for example, is
that's part of it. Like, we should never ever see a YouTube video of the top 10 esports scandals and like 8 of them are owners screwing over players. Like, that could not be a thing.
Sports every day? Does that not happen in traditional sports every day?
No.
You don't think there's players that are getting screwed over constantly there is no
situation in which a player who shows up according to their player contract doesn't get paid.
Okay.
They get paid.
Now, right? but not always.
There may be a situation where a player decides that they want more salary and they have problems between ownership. Like, that's why there are contracts.
Okay, but right? Isn't that a growth thing that comes out of the maturity of the sport? Because I would argue, if you go back to the introduction, especially, we'll say, of, I don't know, black professional players into modern U.S. sports, that they got screwed up, down, left, and right, and were lucky to be allowed to play. Jackie Robinson didn't break the racial barrier. White folk allowed him to play at that time because he had no power. And so in those situations, it was a growth thing that the maturity of the sport allowed to now protections on players over time when it became necessary. And is it possible that with esports today in its infancy, that it has not grown big enough for there to be enough players at enough of a level to need unions or to need some kind of special rules put in place to protect them, because right now they're not getting screwed?
Why wouldn't you do that right in the start? Because it is a successful model that already exists.
Because it may not be necessary yet. It may be additional onus and cost and rigor that isn't needed yet.
Blizzard or ActiBliz makes $1 billion out of duping people into playing World of Warcraft. There's
but
more
that's
than enough
totally
money.
separate from esports. There's gaming makes a lot of money.
It's the same umbrella. ActiBliz owns Overwatch. ActiBliz owns the Overwatch League. ActiBliz makes $1 billion on World of Warcraft, and they ain't spending it on World of Warcraft development. So there's plenty of money.
But they are putting money into the pot when it comes to what the amount of money available for them to make tournaments in esports.
I will take your point as well made that perhaps esports is so young and there's not enough money in it that you can't pay these kids the way you would pay them as if they were actual pro athletes. Like, I get that. Like, 3 years, $400,000 is nothing. Like, that's less than league minimum in every major sport.
Well,
in America,
okay, but
right?
Again, you say every major sport. WNBA? Like the women's sports that are equally the same sport, but they get paid I would argue, criminal amount compared to the male sports side of things. Well, I'm just saying, because $400,000 for someone to play a video game professionally for 3 years is a pretty good salary compared to everyday working Joe stuff.
I'm not disputing that. It's a lot better than the 5 years, $250 million that a bunch of guys are going to sign this offseason when it becomes NBA offseason. That's all I'm saying.
But again, that's more the general perspective of, I would argue, a comparison for the amount of money in currently each venue. Like, yes, if you look at the amount of money the NFL generates in a year, which arguably I would say is criminal in itself because most of it goes to owners and the organization and less to players and, I don't know, all of the people who work stadiums and everything else that make it work and make it exist, that when you do a comparison of how much money is even being put into it, players in competitive esports seem to be doing pretty well. I mean, again, it's still a point where there used to be a time it wasn't your full-time job, or if you were suffering. You know, this is back in the day, 30s, 40s, stuff like that. Like, it was kind of like a secondary activity.
The first pro football contracts were in the hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, right?
Rather than the millions of dollars.
And that's where I'm arguing when you try to do a comparison about quantity, I would say that due to the infancy, it's there. But even then, like eSports, one of the graphs I saw on the Reuters, they talked about the growth of the sport and its viewership and the money involved. And they showed that over the past several years, it's been going up on average about 11% viewership each year, which I would be curious of how that compares to some major sports where I would believe, are already at peaks that just happen to be in very high numbers. And so there's a lot of money already invested. And they did show, like, on the same article, they had a thing about overall global following that Real Soccer, as Hando said, I think it was, has 4 billion followers worldwide. Cricket has 2.5 billion. Field hockey has 2 billion. Tennis has 1 billion. Volleyball has 900 million. Table tennis has 875 million. Basketball, 825 million. Baseball, 500 million. Rugby, 475 million. Golf, 450 million. I think American football falls below all that because it's American. Versus worldwide. But they talk about in the esports level how they're seeing growth in followership that's gone. In 2018, they had a total of some 300, just under 400 million viewers for overall. And this is a generalization of esports, so it goes beyond a single sport. And it's grown.
Can I just
go ahead?
Can I just do a reminder that we also have to have this mindset of this is a brand new thing. This is so new compared to everything we're comparing it to. Even football, which is basketball, which is relatively new, are still, a couple 100 years older. They've got 130, right? So they've got this cultural backdrop that they can rely on, where every single person who is alive was not around when they were first founded. But most people who are alive right now probably were, right?
Right. But Ken, you are somewhat making my point for me. All of the growing pains lessons of how to turn something into a sport have already been learned. So why do we need to relearn them simply because we're not going to a physical place anymore and we're just doing it all over the internet?
Well, I'm still struggling, though, for myself, Todd, to understand what isn't being done in esports that would climb up that past whatever barrier or whatever threshold there is to be a sport. And I say that because I see the team competitions. I see it broken out. I see teams like they have leagues of teams. A difference, I would say, that happens in esports that doesn't exist in traditional sports is you have conglomeration of teams like TSM, like Cloud9, that don't just compete in one sport, but compete in multiple games that they provide competitive, focused, teams for each one of them as a group that you could argue in its own way could be considered like a state or city or something having their sports team. That I see those happening. And I also have an odd one for me because actually I'll come back to this after. I will let you continue in the same because I am looking for that threshold because you mentioned like they may be on a trajectory and you don't currently accept that they are. And I agree with Babs in the sense that most of what I've heard from you, Todd, to me screams of the business side of the marketing side of the money side of something. But that to me speaks nothing of the actual legitimacy of a sport of like, what is it about some activity that makes it a sport versus an activity, right? What is it that makes football actually a legitimate sport that is different, or I'd say more likely hockey because of the size of teams and how it's played, or basketball versus like a 5-on-5 or whatever 6-on-6 Dota team playing a match. Like the difference that really is that threshold. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, take regionality and on-site like teams visiting other teams out of it for now. Because it's COVID and those teams wouldn't travel anyway because we can do it all online, right? Whereas in a big four sport,
which is actually something I do want to bring up later about F1 racing.
Okay. Okay, so let's say that the start of the season was 1st of August, right? Okay. So this is how I would construct it, and if it were constructed this way, I would not have an argument anymore, right? So to give you context, okay? Let's also say 10-team league, 2 5-team divisions, right? Just say 10 teams, 2 5-team divisions. Top team from each division meets and has a championship, and then they're the national champions of American League of Legends, right?
Okay.
Is that fair enough?
Okay. I can accept that because, League of Legends has regional competitions and tournaments that qualify you for the bigger tournaments, and then you go and compete higher and higher.
Okay. So, Team 1 through Team 10. We'll put all the odds in one division and all the evens in the other. Okay? So you have a schedule. Team 1 plays 3, 2 plays 4, 5 plays 7, 6 plays 8, and 9 play 10. Right? And there would be 5 games spread over, say, a weekend, Saturday, Sunday, right? So that you could maximize the amount of eyes that are on all these games, right? So say 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, right? Okay. You would have a schedule where, let's say, you played every other team in your division twice for 8 games total, and all the teams in the other division once. So 13 teams total. You're guaranteed, right?
Okay.
And so at the end, the best records from the 2 divisions get together and play. 13 weeks starting at the 1st of August would lead you to September, October, November. What about Thanksgiving?
Okay.
Is that right? Ish.
Maths.
Let's just say it's Thanksgiving.
Maths and wine. I will say yes.
Okay, good enough. Let's say end of November. Championship game first week of December, right? Okay. Next week, the off season begins, where you patch your game. Right? Remember when Blizzard manipulated the results of the first Overwatch League playoffs by patching their game mid-season? Not a sport. You cannot do that and then play pretend that it would be like the NBA pulling out the 3-point line in February.
Okay. So
like no sport does that.
When I will say that League of Legends doesn't. Like every patch they do, they run on a previous version for competitive play. And they'll patch things into the regular game for players that is like, we're playing with this, balancing this, but the competitive play is on a regimented, this is the version that we do because it doesn't change.
Not just rules being changed over time to hone better, right?
But that's my point. The rules you don't change rules in the middle of a season for your sport. No sport does that.
I agree.
Sure,
we don't
do that either.
And I would say that good competitive esports,
what I'm getting at.
Good competitive esports don't either. Like CS:GO doesn't, League of Legends doesn't, Dota, from what I've seen, doesn't.
Then I have focused on just one sport and applied that to all.
Well, you are talking about Blizzard, so
1st of December, the off season starts. On about, say, the 1st of March the following year is when player contracts expire. So if you're a team and you would like to re-sign one of your players to a new contract and they are on an expiring contract, you have between the 1st of December and the 1st of March to do that. Midnight Eastern time, the 1st of March, anybody who is not currently under contract becomes a free agent.
Okay.
Free agency starts. It
okay,
becomes the Wild West.
I'm curious what that has to do with sports, other than that is the machine we currently exist in that drives the business of who do you get and what your better players are.
I hear you. I'm sorry, Wayne. All of that, in my opinion, is done for the long-term integrity of the sport.
Meaning that allowing contracts to exist how they have ensures a certain level. I'm reaching towards integrity, means that a certain level of fairness for a competitive aspect of teams to acquire talent to keep themselves in some way competitive relative, so that you don't just have a single team or franchise dominate because they have every advantage when it comes to availability of talent. Okay.
That's what I'm
just trying to make sure I'm getting like the definition down, that it's not just that people suddenly became available. The point of it is to allow teams that are perhaps lacking in talent to have some advantage or some ability to acquire better talent, to thus balance their ability to compete. Gotcha.
Correct. 1st of March, free agent period starts. Mid-May, maybe mid-April, draft, amateur draft, right? Where people that were playing collegiate esports or international players, right, that weren't in esports weren't in esports ever, right? So newcomers, and so you have a draft, and the draft goes in reverse record order. So the worst team gets the first pick, the second worst team gets the second pick, and on to the champion gets the last pick, right? And you do that for, I don't know, maybe it's only 3 or 4 rounds because you don't have big teams, right? There's only 5 people on a team. Maybe you have a roster of 8 or 10. I don't know. Like, I'm not quite sure about that. That's all sort of stuff that we could work out later, right? Okay. So you can draft international players. You can draft people that have been playing in college, right? Or potentially we could make room for being able to draft somebody who's in high school. But if you do that, they lose their amateur status.
There are current things we've done that in traditional sports. Yes, when we call things professional versus.
Yep. Okay. So mid-April to mid-May, the amateur draft happens. Beginning of June, owners' meetings start. Do we want to change the rules? Do we want to change the makeup of roster size? Do we want to change the way the schedule is done? Do we want to start playing games on Thursday and Monday?
Okay.
Or Friday,
I will tell you, Todd,
Tuesday.
This again sounds to me very business-sided versus the purity and legitimacy of the sport. That sounds very much like, how do we make more money this year than previous because we play on Monday versus Thursday? That doesn't to me sound like a sports rule-based decision.
Okay, so if you suddenly say that I have to play on Wednesday and then play again on the following Saturday, like, that's a problem logistically, right?
Potentially.
Like, I don't have a chance to prepare for my next opponent.
Yeah, but and if everybody deals with it same, but that's
right.
But if everyone's held to the same rule, is it integrity of sport or something we figured works better for sport? Sorry, I have to run behind because my ice pack fell out the camera. Be right back.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of have his camera over here. You can set on fire because it's a nice, lovely camera.
Indeed, like the whole.
I didn't know he had an ice pack on it. Though. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, apparently so. Like Wayne's so hot. Wayne's so hot makes his camera melt.
He does.
Anyhow, but
I love that.
I mean, so my concern though is to focus more specifically on the what makes this a sport versus how an esport is somehow different. Because whenever I hear things about the schedule or the timing of drafting and stuff like that, those are all just like logistics to me that don't necessarily directly attach to whether a sport is competitive or not, and whether one team versus another can actually perform. Because in esports, I feel like one of the advantages they have is that because so much is done online, virtually, and things where it doesn't require people to necessarily exist in the same location, they can get away with not having to be so regimented on so many things. And I have seen where there was some drama way back in the day. I don't know if it still happens. In the one esport I follow mostly myself, so any experience being League of Legends, had drafts and changes of, not drafts, but changes of team and people playing mid-season and things like that. That could be considered potentially problematic. But at the same time, the challenge or difference is the ability for a gaming community to recruit and build a team in the team-based versions of competition, I think is a lot more open than what we have in traditional sports, especially when you look at a U.S. focus. Where in the U.S., we traditionally do that thing about amateur, professional status, things like that, and where you can pull from. There's no reason an esport team can't recruit essentially someone right out of high school if they show the skills and the capability. Right? But for me, most of this still seems or feels analogous to me, like they're very similar versus disparate versus very different. The only difference that I'm still hearing for the most part sound to be like scheduling or like the nuance behind the business again versus what makes the sport more competitive or legitimate in some form of meaning somebody doesn't get over advantaged or cheats or things like that versus another. Ken, you have a thought.
Yeah, I'm trying to grab it.
I saw your hand.
I have 2 points that I think are kind of similar to what Wayne's saying, and maybe it'll help solidify some of it. So my first point is the problem just the phrasing of the word esport? Is it because it has the word sport in it? Is that the thing that we're really getting mostly like disagreement over? Because sports are generally physical activities. And then my second point is, if we look at the history of sporting events, there are other competitive events that exist, are not necessarily within the Venn diagram of sports, but kind of loosely are used in that same competitive theme. For example, there are chess competitions that were once held at the Olympics, right? There was once also knitting competitions at the Olympics, right?
I didn't know there was competitive or Olympic knitting.
Yeah, there's some competitive, interesting things that existed over not only the last couple of centuries when the Olympics was reopened, but also thousands of years ago when the Olympics was around, right? And the point is that we had this large umbrella term of the Olympics being for competitiveness in general. I think that the word sports, I don't know the etymology of the word. I don't know where it came from necessarily, but at least with the Olympic games are a type of sport, but also not a type of sport, right? And because that's why they're called the Olympic Games, right? These are video games. It's still something that's competitive. It's still something that, just because it's not an exercise and it's not actively, I don't know, you don't have to work out or run laps or something in order to do it. You can still have peak performance in different ways. Generally speaking, you need to be young, right? If you want to be one of the best gamers in the world, you need to have really good ability to react extremely quickly to certain stimulus, right?
Yes.
You see somebody walking in front of you, you need to shoot them quickly, right?
Yes.
You also need to train that. You need to be very good at aiming. And there's lots of things that are clearly, as Wade said, analogous to real sports, right?
Well, so I don't dispute that. My arguments are not whether or not competitive gaming is skill-based or whether or not competitive gaming under the correct model could be looked at like a sport. My argument is simply that no one up to this point has put together what I consider to be a correct model for what a sport has to have or what an endeavor has to have to be considered a professional sport.
Okay.
Right? So we don't consider professional wrestling sport.
Well,
why?
But why
it's
not?
Certainly
right?
Physical. It's certainly a display of skill.
But one of the things I see about that is
who's going to win and lose.
It's scripted
in advance.
It's scripted. It's a storytelling endeavor. It's not an actual competition. Okay. I would argue I don't see the esport that suffers from that. I don't see an esport where they say this team's going to win versus that one because the drama we ensue in the story we tell. So for me, it's like that makes that I don't see a comparison with WWE in any way.
No, and I agree with you. They're not the same. But we can use the same style of argument. Here's what OWL has versus other things that we know are sports. And when I do that, I come up lacking.
Now, I would challenge, Todd, just as a question in general, do you give any concession or thought that perhaps some of your limiting or your lack of desire to accept certain and esports as a whole or any specific example of esports as being equivalent in ways in your mind as being a sport or the same legitimacy as a sport, as a competitive sport, because perhaps you don't have interest yourself in watching and participating as a fan of or supporting those esports we currently see?
No,
I mean,
not at
and
all.
I wonder because
and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. I have no passing interest in golf, except when Tiger Woods is in contention to win.
He makes it more exciting than traditional golf.
Golf is still a sport, right? I have no particular interest in baseball unless the Milwaukee baseball team has a chance to win a title or to win the World Series. Baseball is still a sport. The fact that I don't care what a League of Legends, what the League of Legends World Championships looks like, it does not, I don't think, paint my opinion of whether or not it is a sport. In fact, I would like esports to be looked at the same level as sports. But you got to get the people like me, right? Like long as I can, and you don't have to get the people like me to watch. You have to get the people like me to make the begrudging nod that says, yeah, okay. Like, I used to bag on esports because they used to let people cheat and not ban people for life, and they used to manipulate the results of their playoffs, so they don't do that anymore. And the team owners used to defraud and screw their players, and they don't do that anymore.
Like every sport in history, yes.
And at some point, like, you have to begrudgingly nod and go, well, I've held this opinion for a long time that esports isn't sports, but they've done all the things to me that I think that esports needed to have to be sports, so now I got to give it to them, right? There's no reason that the results of the League of Legends tournament shouldn't show up on SportsCenter.
I agree with that. Yep.
No reason whatsoever. But it's not, and there's a reason for that. And so all of this ranting that I've been doing for the last 2 hours, in my opinion, is a not insignificant part of that. But another part of that is because the average fans of esports don't fit in the demo.
Well, I was going to say, is that more a generational thing? Because yes, our parents are probably not following whoever's playing, Dota 2 right now in competitive sports, esports. Sure. But I know a lot of
fan doesn't have an ESPN subscription.
Well, I was going to say, what's interesting to me is seeing how similar to how we saw Legend talk about earlier about not having any interest in sports, traditional sports. I know a ton of demographics who do wear and follow the merch and follow the teams in various competitive esport type games who do not identify or follow any traditional sports. And so I wonder if we're not going to see some potential shift as generations grow and age that are going different. Because one of the things that came up as a note right now, and I'm going to transition to something I wanted to bring up, that Babs mentioned earlier, was in this time of pandemic, in this time of various types of lockdowns and considerations that have had to be made, it's been very interesting to watch how various organizations, teams, groups, sports, whatever, adapted. And one that I want to bring up specifically was a hybrid, because initially, right, esports didn't really suffer. They had some modifications. Teams wouldn't show up at the arenas. And Babs even shared a story that the Oakland gaming arena has shut down indefinitely, gone now because of COVID, along with a lot of other things that have traditionally shut down. But one of the examples I ran into was F1 racing. And I want to bring it up because I kept running through in a place that I never thought I would get drawn into or ever expect to see motorsports and the way it was driven was through social media, where during the lockdown, F1 racing did a thing where they adapted and basically stopped holding real live races, but instead started using gaming engines to perform professional race events. And they did a great job of it, in my opinion. I watched where I would scroll through basically a Facebook feed and see on their streaming gaming channel type streams an F1 race. And when I'd stream through it, it looked like I was watching a legit F1 race, not a video game. And caught myself watching, which I had never done with F1 racing. But dang it, if their adaptation to what the Plague provided for them to go digital, where they could basically had all the original teams, professional race drivers running on virtual rigs with all the nice equipment, because damn it, they can afford it. Basically, they already had it in their paddocks, right? They train on virtual sims off season anyways because it's cheaper than running a car. And so they
figured out a way to hook up all the sims to each other.
And they just played
cool.
They basically played Corsica or whatever that racing engine or whichever engine they did. They provided custom digital in cameras, the same exact broadcasters who covered the sport, as well as having all your same comms with the guys. It was amazing. I was like, holy cow, this is almost better than watching it live because you had so many digital angles and stuff like that.
Yep.
It was a crazy hybrid.
No, Wayne, it's a great point. Credit where it's due. It sounds like Formula One is probably one of the best models that we have.
Well, it was a hybrid, right? It's still a traditional model of their sport, like they've always had in motorsports. Sure. They just adapted in ways, some businesses better than others, to the predicament at the time and using technology to still allow them to perform the same tools. Now, did it work great? Not always. There were some drivers, and I had a little like warmth in my heart of a story I read where a driver basically got kicked off of his team, lost his contract because he was a whiny little bitch when it came to his actual race, because they had rules in place about the digital aspect that said you could get 3 restarts, like 3 resets in game. If something digitally happened, you flew off course or something. And he exceeded those. And instead of him sticking around and being like, well, I lost because my car's broken now, he basically just bitched and left the game. And so the team sponsoring him, playing millions of dollars, was like, are you kidding me? You just
understandable.
Cried about it and they fired him.
Worth a toll.
No, totally understandable. Absolutely. 100%. It sounds fantastic. And again, like I want to give credit where it's due, right? I want to be one of these people who says like, hey, Overwatch League or CS:GO League or your mom's League of Legends League. I don't know. Mom lol.
Mom's lol.
Your mom's League of Legends League. It's not redundant at all. That progress is being made, or that even somebody again like me who's deeply cynical about this has to sit back and go, you know what? Like I've levied a lot of crap at these people, but they've finally gotten there. I don't understand why it can't be there day one. Maybe it's because I came up with this in the last 2 days. Maybe it's because you need a lot of on-hand cash to run the infrastructure of a league the way that I'm talking about, according to the models that I'm talking about. And none of these companies are operating this way, nor are necessarily any of the team owners, right? So maybe it's a matter of finance rather than gross capital infrastructure.
I guess my challenge is whenever I hear the financial aspect of something around sports, to me that means business, not sports, because I feel like sports should exist outside of the financial aspect of it, in the sense of like we have today in the United States and in a lot of countries a mechanism to start experiencing competitive sports play at a young age, be it collegiate sports here in the US to high school, middle school, high school, college structures that translate into professional potential gaming or experiences that I'm seeing personally mimicked in gaming, where, like Ken had said earlier, scholarships that I'm seeing awarded for competitive game teams, and how that's expanded significantly.
Teams,
there's 50 major colleges in the U.S. right now that have scholarships for esports, which is massive compared to what it was a couple years ago. I feel like we're in this stage of esports as we get towards the end of the show here, that it's interesting. The comparison's there because you have people who enjoy watching people perform at a professional level, at a very highly skilled level at all these things, right? Traditional sports, I would not go out on a field with any professional sports ball team and expect I could compete, let alone not get deathly injured, right? I could not.
Right.
In esports, I don't think I could even show up on the field on a League of Legends match on a 5-man and not just get demolished based on the people who are actively competing in the game. There are skills shown that are way beyond my level, and I would argue the general populace, but both, I think, have a similar level of ways that you can engage. I can go play some kind of sport with people and expect that maybe I'm playing the same game that professionals do, just not the same level. I can play League of Legends every day on my desktop here and choose to go into the 5-man and hate myself versus ARAMs where I'm happy and know that I'm at least playing the same game the professionals do, even if my skill isn't there, right? And so I feel like there's still a lot of things that are very comparable, and it may be something that for all of us, because of our differences growing up and what we've enjoyed, whether we feel like something is more specifically in tune with what we're used to or not.
I'm going to try one more time and only take 2 minutes.
Gotcha. And then I'll let Ken, you follow that.
What's that?
And then I'm going to say, and then Ken, I want you to opine after Todd.
Yep. Okay. I do not see any of the infrastructure that sports traditionally has had that serves in the role to protect players from both team ownership and league ownership.
Okay.
And that's where I think a lot of my railing and bitterness comes from. And that's where I think that player contracts and drafts and season calendars and all of this infrastructure, player unions and all of this infrastructure would be designed to do, is to protect the players not only from team owners, but also from league owners.
Okay.
And that's what one of the big things, it's not the only thing, but it's one of the big things that I am missing, and where I see just an enormous but shrinking gap between sports and esports.
Okay, so that is what Todd has stated for us, is something that he still sees as a divergent aspect between sports and esports. Ken, where do you see, after our discussion today, kind of how sports and esports compare?
It is interesting to hear Todd's point of view, because it is from expertise that I just do not have regarding sports, and it's interesting to hear the management side of the sports. How the considerations of how they're scheduled and the contracts and the all that stuff is stuff that I just am completely unaware of. So that's very interesting. Has it swayed me? I think all that's done is made me realize how much esports needs to grow. Also, the chat has helped me learn that the term esports itself as a phrase is pretty misleading and really just controversial. I mean, why couldn't they just call it video game leagues or something? Like, that would have been absolutely fine, because they do that with poker. Like, they do it with darts, right? They're not trying to claim that it's a sport per se, even though there's some clear overlap in terms of how it can be done. And I see that, League of Legends and such are really trying to, flesh this out in this sporty manner by having arenas and stuff, right? And I think it's because they're trying to go down that route of we want to do all the same things sports does, therefore we need to make that obvious in the name. And I think it's played well for them. However, I think it's also excluded a lot of people who are actual sports fans who are instantly like, ugh, what are the nerds up to? So yeah, I think esports as a term is kind of stupid. I think esports themselves are great. I'm not personally massively into them, though I do enjoy watching, the League of Legends stuff occasionally. Some of the best experiences I had out of all of sports and esports is actually just sitting watching esports with a couple buddies back in Scotland, having a few beers over a few hours, eating crap food. And if we had the experience that I think many people have on sports ball days and such. So that's something I never experienced as somebody who doesn't like sports. And the fact that I can experience that through video games instead was really enjoyable and special. And thank you again, chat, for all your fantastic input. That's been really interesting. I've been keeping an eye on it. You're all very knowledgeable about stuff that I am not. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise, and you as well, Todd. You know a lot about all this stuff that I do not. So thank you for sharing.
No worries.
All right, and for
Wayne, thank you for moderating us. Very much appreciated as well.
Well, I mean, this is a discussion amongst all of us. And for mine, just so that people know my opinion at the end as well, is that I generally feel like esports is really coming up in its level of accomplishing a lot of the things that I see traditional sports do. So for me personally, I tend to find that they have enough similarities for me to be comfortable with calling them esports, and it doesn't bother me. That being said, you've heard all of our opinions and our thoughts, and hopefully you've engaged each other in the conversation that we've had in the chat. I think it's been really engaging today. I've enjoyed it. Thank you for participating. And if you'd like to continue, you can engage us on Reddit, on our forum there. You can engage us in the show notes on YouTube for this show as well, and continue to do that. And if you have a more robust opinion you want to share, we will happily re-engage with it next week on the show. And you can email us in at VtWShowX@gmail.com, and we will happily read it. Because if you did not notice from the upfront, if you did with Ionis's, we will spend a half hour going to clean up on someone's email. So don't feel like we're going to waste it. With that note, we have a little bit of problematic as we are running over time here, but to finish things out, expect from us some kind of spooky Halloween show-esque. I think we were talking about the 25th that we were talking about as a show
that's the
highlight,
that's our last show we're doing before Halloween.
Yeah, discuss scary games, and because I know there's a lot of you out there who enjoy them, none of us on the show do. And so, but with that in mind, we are happy to talk about scary games, horror games, things like that. And so if you could, we're asking of you to email us in at VtWShowX@gmail.com some of your favorite horror games, scary games, Halloween games, themes for this October season.
Let's also chat about movies and stuff as well, right? Because why not expand into that? I think we all have various opinions on stuff like that too. Novels as well.
Yeah, anything that brings you in about this, we'd love to hear from you guys. So please email us. We also may or may not, and we're leaning heavily towards wanting to satisfy you guys as fans, allow you to help us either vote or discuss of maybe a top 10 of, scary games that we may participate between Ken and I, if nothing else, playing and streaming for your enjoyment, our experience, something along those lines. Because, like I said, none of us are big horror fans. I hate
it's like
horror games.
Coaster, isn't it?
Dare post-funky dance.
We are willing to do what we can to entertain you. So keep that in mind. We're coming up with that. So please share with us the things you like that are scary, why, and so that we can talk about it on that show, because we would like to amuse you at our, I'm going to hate it. I know it's going to be me, and I'm going to hate it, but that's all right. So with that, we're going to end things this week. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Ken, could you give us the official outs, and then we will /lead our way out of here?
Sure thing. You have been listening to ShowX live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, wherever else you have been. Thank you so much for listening in. We are everywhere on the internet. You can support us in so many ways. Hit that subscribe button, hit alert, whatever, notifications, all that stuff. You can also follow us on twitter.com/DocDead, twitter.com/drkenreed, and twitter.com/VtWShowX for Mr. Wayne, for myself, and for the show actual account as well. Follow us all of those and retweet us and such as well. We much appreciate that. You can check us out in reddit.com/r/showx. That's where you'll find us for the post show discussion. If you have anything you want to raise there and chat back and forth with other people here about it, you can do so there. You can also email in long-term format, long format way, long format way of emailing instead of on Reddit by emailing us to VtWShowX@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on whatever you want, really. I mean, you can Geek Cred, what you've been up to, controversial issues, potential show topics are welcome as well, feedback, as well as stuff we've already talked about, including today's topic of our esports, actually sports. You can also check us on Facebook, like us on Show Space X there. We keep updates going off there as well. And you can also support us on patreon.com/ShowX. Minimum of $1 per month. That's always helpful. It keeps us afloat in terms of keeping our financial responsibilities, such as hosting and websites and software and hardware and all that stuff. But most importantly, if you could just share us around the place, tell your friends, and watch the show. That's the best thing you can do for us. And we appreciate you guys all coming here every single week. All 16 of you, thank you. We love you. And thank you guys for joining me here on the show today as well, even though I was half an hour late.
And with that, ShowX is going to wish all of you a happy /salute to all of you for watching. Salute. So thank you very much, and we are out of here.
Goodbye. See you next zombie.